All right, cool. So the reason I asked Dan to come and talk to you guys is getting ready for portfolio review, and I want you guys to be as prepared as possible for who's out there and who's reviewing, who's looking at portfolios. How many portfolios are you looking at monthly, Dan? Probably a ton.
Yeah, I mean, we just did 2 job postings for an illustrator and Regina Motion Graphics, and we got about 375 applications.
Crazy. So that's the reason I was hoping to get you here, was really to kind of talk a little bit about what you're seeing, what's working, what's not, and any other tips and things, and then we'll open it to like Q&A at the end there. So up front, I just want to ask you, like, what are the things you're seeing? What's the newest thing that really caught your eye? And then also, what are some of the common mistakes that you're seeing the applicants do?
So I can tell you one thing right off the bat was, out of these, when you get that many emails with resumes and things like that, I would encourage you to include a PDF of at least, a small PDF, whatever it is, under 10 megs, but at least some of your work, a small snippet of your work. I got a lot of emails that had basically a short little blurb. Hey, I saw the position, would love to work for you, and a link to their website. I actually, when I sat down to look at a lot of the resumes, I was on a plane flight. The Wi-Fi was super crappy. And so like clicking on those links, I couldn't really see anything. So I basically I first went through all 350 and I looked at the ones that actually included work in the email and I saved those because I could see those without having to leave email program. I mean, you got to think the people looking at these portfolios and your email are very busy. So even for them to click on an email, leave, go to your website, scroll through your website, it can be a lot of work. If you can make a first impression inside that email with just like a PDF, they click on it, pops up, they look through your work, they go back, and then if they want to go to your website, they will. So that was like a struggle for me, was like a lot of it was, hey, I want the job, go look at my work on my website. I would encourage a PDF, some kind of work. And then like I got a lot of cover letters and resumes. I'm not huge on a cover letter. I wouldn't spend, and this is, every employer is different. I wouldn't spend a ton of time on a cover letter. I would say spend more time on how your resume looks and then your portfolio. The cover letter piece will come in the first interview. Like I'll get deeper into who you are, why you want the job, how you heard about us, things like that when we have that first Zoom call and interview. I just wouldn't spend a lot of time on the cover letter. That's just me personal. I know, some employers probably encourage it. But yeah, so I mean, just looking at what we're receiving now, I would love to see a PDF in there, even if it only has 2 or 3 pieces. And then when it comes to like your full book and your full portfolio, if you do have a full PDF and stuff, I would make sure it focuses on 1 or 2 things, whether like, if you're good at logos and branding, make sure that comes across in it. I wouldn't try and cover everything A to Z. If you don't want to go into designing websites, don't even put it in the portfolio. Put in there, what you want to do for a career, and make that 80% of the portfolio. You definitely need to show a little bit of range, coming out of school, but focus on something so that the employer could quickly say, okay, this person is really good at branding, or wow, this person is great at packaging. There needs to be some kind of direction that the employee can see that you're strong in, more so than just a very broad portfolio.
When you see this PDF, is it an abbreviated like best of the portfolio? So it's a quick read and you're like, this is a yes or a no kind of for the next step?
Yeah. And, I honestly, yes. And I would say 10 pages, 12 pages. Like I said, it's got to be another, probably 10, 12 megs for you to email, but your best stuff in there, just the highlights, like look through that PDF and then go to your website to see more. You see kind of more of the process and things like that. But yeah, I encourage just the highlights in that first email and then let people look into it more.
Cool. and no problem with it being an attachment. You know, obviously we're sending links so much. You're cool with it being a few megs, and that's not an issue.
Yep, I would rather have it. I'd rather have the email, click, open that PDF, look through it, and kind of make a decision, as opposed to clicking that link, opening up the website, figuring out where is the work, how many is it, or is there logo packaging, like what is the navigation system, all that.
Gotcha. What's something? Oh, go ahead.
I would say just think to yourself, like, how can I make this fast and easy for the person reviewing it? Because a lot of times that's what it's going to come down to. And it's going to keep it from getting lost in the mix of a couple hundred emails.
Perfect. What's something you've seen that like just totally shocked you? You went, this is a winner, like something new, something refreshing. Has anything stood out in the last few months?
I mean, I did a thing a couple of years back when we were hiring, and I asked people to, if you really want the job, send a physical portfolio. Like that's how I got my first job. I mean, this is back in 2000, so this is 24 years ago, but I sent like a physical portfolio at that time with a CD-ROM, printed resume on this like plastic and in this package. And I sent it to 3 employers. I got calls from all 3 and offers. So I mentioned in this couple of years back, like I said, hey, if you really want the job, I'm big on like a physical portfolio. And this was more for a designer position. And I had a lot of physical portfolios sent, and it was really cool. I mean, to me, it was like they put the time and effort. I got some kind of book or printouts or something that I could sit down and look at. So I had a couple this time that did that as well, even though the job was like, one was for, motion graphics. I don't expect a physical portfolio, but when it is graphic design, if you can get the address and get something physical in the employer's hands, like it's a big deal. They have a hard time, and if it's done right, they have a hard time throwing that away. Or they will say, wow, yep, I saw this logo in the email. Okay, now they made a second effort to send something in the mail. So that stuff for me always goes a long way, just because we do deal with print stuff here. So I like physical design.
Yeah. So see how that you guys have it, everything's so digital. I think that's really some of the going back to the days of sending a physical thing that you can't just put it in trash in your email or draft or look at later. It's something you can't ignore it, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Especially nowadays, And then even like, I don't know how you guys are doing it there, or how people feel about like, I feel like, websites were lost, say for the last, I don't know, 6-8 years with Instagram taking over, and your portfolios on there, and you're like, I don't need it. Go see it all on Instagram. I do feel like it's coming back to the website piece now, where the algorithm and everything with social media is a bit up in the air and funky. So like having that physical portfolio online on a website does show a commitment outside of, oh, it's all on my Instagram, go check it out and see it there. And I get that, and you can really, you can get a vibe for sure, and see the work on Instagram or social media, but to put the time and effort into a website, have a couple pages, explain to yourself how's your work, like I think it's key nowadays more than ever.
Yeah, we're pushing for sure the portfolio, for sure case studies. Our questions now have become how many case studies and the length of the case study, right? I think we're hearing from most people that consolidate a little bit, best of the best only. Is that what you would like? If the work speaks for itself, does any of that stuff matter, or is it just you could tell when a person is right for that fit and the job you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, we have kind of a distinct style here in a way, so I can kind of very quickly, tell if somebody's work or style is going to fit. I do think a case study can get too long and drawn out, shorter the better for sure.
Is there, when you look at principles and even like nuances, what are the things that you're seeing that tell you this person's not just the good artist and maybe even a great presenter or a good interview, but the craftsmanships and the those things that you're seeing in between the lines. What grabs your attention when you look at the work and you go like, this person knows what they're doing?
I would say, for one thing, if you're not an illustrator and you're not good at, say, sketching, whether it's logo concepts or whatever, leave it out. Like, I don't need to see that. Like, if you are good, and you can do a ton of concepts, napkin sketches, and kind of go through that whole process A to Z, like, great, and those sketches are pretty good, they're pretty tight, then cool, then show that. If not, like, I would encourage, leave it out. Like, honestly, you get to a studio like this, like, there is not a lot of time for you to sit in the corner and napkin sketch for 8 hours and kind of flush out those concepts. For the most part, most people, these guys you might be at your desk, you might spend 30 minutes, an hour kind of getting some ideas on paper, and then you're in the computer and you're off and running. So yeah, that's one of my big things I've seen where, it's kind of blown out, this whole case study, and it starts with these sketches that just, they're not tight enough to be included.
I like that. I think we're in that zone where maybe the sketches we're throwing it in there feeling you got to show some process, but you're right. If it's not tight, that's what you're going to remember, right? Might as well take it out.
Yeah. Okay. And it's one of those things, if that's at the top, and it's, you got your work that you did for, whoever, for the bakery down the street, and the first thing the employer sees are those sketches, and they're just not up to par, they might not continue down that page and just might leave, so. And I would almost, I don't know how you guys do it. Everybody, presents a portfolio different, but if it is like a rebrand, put the old logo, the new logo up top, and then start your case study underneath that, so somebody can see right away, okay, that was okay, and what they did, as a rebrand, that looks amazing. Good job. Now let me see how they got there.
Like you had a seat run. That's good. You guys, I want to open up to you guys. You got about 35 minutes or so. Welcome back. Any questions from you guys? There is a design sticker up for grab if you ask a question. Yeah, you got a first question. Yeah.
I got a question.
Oh yeah, please do.
What as far as students in the room and everybody, does anybody plan on graduating and going freelance full time? Like, or are you guys looking into jobs, and like what are you guys teaching there, Nick, as far as like the freelance route and things like that? Because I have a very harsh, straight view on that coming out of school, just because of the way I did it and what's still working for me today, 25 years later.
I bet we probably have the same opinion. I never encourage them to make the freelance jump right out of school, unless if people are knocking on their door for something they can do, right? Like if that's the case, great. But nothing matches the experience and the wisdom and what you get working under a roof with somebody else for a few years.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've always said is, my first job was at DC Shoes, a skateboard shoe company in San Diego, and I worked there for 5 years, and the jobs and contacts I still have today go back to those 5 years. Without those 5 years, like, none of these skateboards would exist. We have a client, we're doing a big event in Park City, worked with her 20 years ago at DC. Like, there's so many contacts that I made that went to different companies and all over in the industry that I still work with. And without that, like, I don't think I would be at this spot right now. So that's where I always encourage, like, that network is huge. Yeah. If you are doing freelance, like Nick and I know, go out to the creative conferences, you have to have some kind of network, but a network from inside of an agency or inside of a, in-house in a company is huge. Those people that you work with will go other places. They will move up the ladder. They will have budgets to hire you. If you are doing freelance now and you got a bunch of work, like I think that's great. But I think you can also do that at night and on the side for a while and still have a full-time job. That's how I ended up starting a studio. I was at DC. I was doing freelance with a high school buddy. Quit DC, jumped off him, and I started a studio, and just kind of went from there. So I would just encourage, get out there, get your foot in the door, whether it's in-house, in a in-house design studio or whatever at a company, and do your best for a couple of years, and then see what happens.
Yeah. The crazy thing is, this last maybe 6 months, we've kind of changed a little bit because the climate's so different in the job market. And I've never encouraged freelance at the very beginning of their career, right after graduation, but that's something they might have to get into before the full-time job does happen. I don't know, sure it's kind of the same in your neck of the woods there, but yeah, we have our alumni are getting laid off left and right. The entertainment made a huge, we're feeling it now, it feels like, even though they're all back. And so we're just trying to get them, one, as ready as they can, like always, but two, maybe start thinking of those skills of, can you do something freelance in the meantime or whatever? I never want to put that out there, but it's kind of the sign of the times.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of those freelance jobs may lead into full-time employment at some of those companies or whatever it is. I mean, we're all fortunate enough that we can do our jobs from home and do freelance. I mean, we're in a great career, when it comes to like, hey, the freelance thing, it does work and you can make a living at it, I would just think to yourself, if you get into it and you get 5 years into it, 10 years into it, what does this look like? You guys aren't thinking about this right now, but what does it look like when I'm 40 and I'm still doing freelance? And, so it's definitely something to think about. Yeah, the job market right now is not, that hot. I mean, we've got Nike up the road here and they're laying off a ton of people and this and that. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to that stuff, like we here at studios like this and you guys as freelancers, in a lot of ways, that stuff trickles down to us. I've seen it in 2008, 2009, kind of with the housing crash. A lot of people got laid off. When those big companies lay off employees, they still have projects that are lined up for the next 2-3 years that have to get done. They cut their payroll, but tomorrow somebody needs to do that job. If nobody's there to do it, it's cheaper for them to hire us or to hire you than it is to keep those people on payroll. So in reality, for like a studio like mine, a lot of times it ends up having the opposite effect where, I mean, we're busier than we ever have been. So, and as far as the freelance market, it should be the same. There should be work out there. So, yeah.
Anybody got one? Yeah, go ahead. Might want to get out a little closer. Yeah.
Hello. I have a quick question. In your opinion, what is the most important question to ask for you?
What's that? You broke up at the end. Most important question to ask in an interview, or?
Yes. Yeah.
From you, from the
From the interviewee. Yeah.
I just missed the end again.
I'll try to get. He's asking, as an interviewee, what would be a great question to ask the company that he's interviewing with, or the person on the other side of the desk?
Okay. Yeah. I would ask. I would ask a little bit about the culture, and I don't want to say what they have to offer you because you're not totally in that position to do that. But like when we hire somebody here, it's about 50%. Can you do the work? Does it fit with our style? Can you do the work? The other 50% is, do you kind of fit in with the rest of the team? In some ways, you guys, as going into an interview, I think towards the end, I would ask the employer, like, what does the culture look like there? Well, what do you guys do for fun outside of work? Just to see whether it is, and try and pick their brain. Like, is it a grind? Is it, do you guys ever get out and do anything fun, type of thing? Because you want, wherever you go, and this is another thing, wherever you go, I would encourage you to stay 5 years minimum. When I see on somebody's resume, I got a bunch of resumes where every year or every 2 year they move. They're somewhere else, and I'm like, no way, not even going to consider you. You got to put in 4 or 5 years somewhere to really get something out of that company where you're going to benefit. Even like I said, the network part of it. If you're in there for a year or two, you jump to somewhere else and you just try to move up this ladder. Like, you're never really going to get to know those people and really get a network. But if you don't like where you're at, then you're going to do that. So I would just encourage, like, ask some questions around, breaks and, are there creative trips? What do you guys offer? Anything as far as like even education and workshops and things like that? Can I go to creative conferences, that you guys send me to? Is that open? Is that something you guys do? Just things that are important to you, Because an employer, a lot of times, is not thinking of that, They're thinking like, what are you going to do for me? Of course. But I think if you can kind of put it back in say in my, on my lap and say, well, what does Lincoln do outside of just, sitting at the studio and doing work? So I hope that helps.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone else has something, but I have one more question. Now that I asked you what type of question you should ask, you guys, or the employer, what's the question that we should like never ask? Especially in the first.
Basically, like, you should never ask.
Yeah.
Geez.
Is salary something that's talked about at the beginning, or because like I think that's one question I would think that's like, hey, that how much does it pay? And if it's the first interview, I'd be like, yikes,
So yeah, and so for me, I try and get that out of the way before the first interview. I try and give a range of like, hey, this is what the job pays. If you're not in this range, then let's not even jump on that first call. I wouldn't string you along to the end and be like, we're 3 interviews in and hey, this is what it pays, and you're like, oh, I thought it paid a lot more. I mean, it's kind of like you go to, if you're on some of the job websites or Nike, a lot of times it'll say, the range. So in reality, like, you should almost know going into the interview, like a rough range that company's willing to pay you. If not, it's a little weird to ask. Yeah, I wouldn't ask that right off the bat, I would wait till after and then maybe shoot a follow-up email. Hey, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Very interested. Is there any way I can get a salary range for the job that we're talking about?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. I would also say, just doing, a lot of obviously Zoom interviews nowadays and things. Think about, and you probably talk about this all the time, Nick, but think about your background. Think about what you're wearing, the lighting, like, yeah. I had a guy
coming in your face.
Yeah. We make a joke because Dustin, who's been with me for like 15 years now, but he had brought a guy to my old studio in San Diego that a friend of his, and he's like, hey, he's a good designer. We have an opening. And I'm like, cool, bring him in. I want to interview him. Well, he came in and this was, in person, and he was chewing gum the whole time, but like just chewing. And he seemed very like just kind of relaxed and feet up on the it was a coffee table. We had a couch, so it was kind of a really chill conference room, but like feet up on the table, chewing gum, this and that. And I was like, man, this is not the guy. And so Dustin always makes a joke. Hey, you know, was he chewing gum on the interview? I'm like, no, it's only happened once. Like, so just little things like that, you know, you don't have to wear a suit and tie and things. But I can tell you one thing, Jake, our videographer, we did a posting, he's been here 2.5 years now. We did a posting for a videographer, you know, got a ton of resumes, ton of links to websites, this and that. He actually sent a video and shot a video of like him talking to me, like, hey Dan, this is Jake. This is what I've done, this and that. I want to work, you know, I want to do this. I'd love to have the job. And he said, I know you have an event coming up. I will jump in the RV and shoot that event if you'll pick me up. And so for me, right away, it sparked like, this guy is really into working here. He obviously follows exactly what we do because he knows we're about to leave in a week on an event. That kind of like, I was like, okay, this kid is like really into this. So ended up taking him up on the offer, picked him up. He went down to LA to DesignerCon with us, worked the whole weekend, shot the video, and he's been here the last 2.5 years. So there are those things like even in an email, in the body, if there's something that like refers to someone else here at the studio or a project we've done or a trip we've been on, something that's like that shows I know more than just your job title. Because there are a lot of I get a lot of emails that are basically, you can tell it's kind of copy and pasted. Hey, I love the job. Check out my portfolio. It's like, okay, cool. But then the ones you do get that are like, hey, I noticed you guys were doing this and this. I love that you do that, da da da. Or hey, tell Jordan I said hi. And it's like, okay, this person actually knows what we do, follows our work, and now wants to work here. So just those little things like grab people's attention.
A lot of people hear that. Oh, we'll get to you in a second, Haley. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, so like when like making a portfolio, would it be better to have like one that's super fine tuned for the company you want to apply for? So like would it be better to include like 10 things that stylistically fit, or maybe like 5 things that stylistically fit, and 5 other things that like you know, like reach kind of thing? Or would that be a better option?
Yeah, if you know, like this is the company I want to work for, they are hiring, you know, I would do your best to curate that portfolio and that resume pitch to that studio, to that company with the work in there. Yeah, I would keep it like 80-20. If you can put work in there that relates to say what we do here, and you know, I'm gonna see like say you do a bunch of real estate design, we don't do anything like that here, but then you have a bunch of, say, you know, I don't know, skateboard graphics, action sports stuff, put most of that in there, you know. I'm gonna notice that more so. It's gonna relate and be able to see how you're gonna fit in here. So yeah, I would definitely curate it to the company if you can, and if you know there is that position.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Haley, you wanted to ask your question?
Yes, I had 2 questions. One of them was, what's something you know now that you wish you knew as a beginner designer? And then I have another question is, what's something you wish you knew before becoming a creative director?
Okay, yep. Before, I mean, I wish when I was coming out of school, I had access to the resources that you guys do as far as the content online, YouTube, you know, social media, being able to learn the programs and things, you know, or continue your education, say, on YouTube or Google, whatever you want. And it's like, hey, how do I do this in Illustrator? I can't figure it out. Boom, it's right there. You have access to that. Like, I didn't have that, you know, coming up. And I think that's such a huge resource for everybody now. That's something that I wish I had and you know, obviously did not. Also be careful, like when I came out of school, I mean, this dates me, but it was Cork Express is what you use to lay out magazine ads and and catalogs and things. And when I was at DC, we were doing a ton of print ads for Rolling Stone magazine and Skateboard Mag, Snowboard Mags, and then these huge 200-page catalogs. They were all done in cork, which was great. But then halfway through the 5 years there, InDesign came out, and we ditched till we shifted from cork to InDesign. And it was a huge struggle for everyone. It was kind of a big pain in the ass, and we kind of screwed up a couple catalogs and this and that. But my point is, don't get too invested in like one piece of software. Like, it can change. And especially with Adobe, who knows what the hell they're going to do and what they're going to buy and what they're going to kill and this and that. So, you know, you need to be able to use them all, you know, whether it's Illustrator, Photoshop. That's even with our illustrators here. You know, some of them are very good in Photoshop and not so good in Illustrator, but there's still things that I'm like, dude, we need this final thing done in Illustrator. Either you need to live trace it and clean it up, or go back in and finalize it as vector, like, because the Photoshop files can work. So yeah, I would just say round yourself out as far as like programs and things like that. What was the second one, Haley? Sorry.
Thank you. The second one was, what's something you wish you knew before becoming a creative director?
I mean, I would say I wish I knew before owning a studio how hard of work it would be 20 years into it. I've said in the past, like, I don't know, I wouldn't say that like what I did here and my route is for everybody. I do kind of envy some of these guys who they have a full-time job here and then they have like a freelance gig on the side and on the weekend. I've never been able to do that because every weekend, every second outside of work, I'm thinking about work or working on something else for the office. So, you know, for me, looking back, I wouldn't change anything, but at the same time, it's a long road. If you want to own a studio, have, you know, 15, 20 employees, just make sure you're that person and really want to do that before striving for that. Because there's a lot of other, you know, paths and opportunities that are just as lucrative and might not consume your whole life, you know? So yeah. I hope that answers that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's here? Yeah, one by. Hi Dan. From your experience, are your clients looking for a specific skill set? Can you give us any insights on maybe it's like motion is more sought out here, if that's something that you're looking for more in new applications and things like that?
Yes. Yeah. So over the last couple of years, you know, we dove into motion and video a lot just because we were asked to do it a lot. We had a lot of projects that we completed, and then handed off to another studio for them to do the motion graphics piece of it. You know, I think nowadays it's not enough, even with a logo. You know, it's at some point people feel like I need to see what that looks like if it was to move. You know, even scrolling through social media, it's so hard to get somebody to stop now on a static image. So it's something that we were kind of forced into, and we're putting an emphasis on it now. But I do think, and what I have seen is, as far as like motion graphics and 3D and stuff, if you have a background in design, and Frankie will tell you this because he kind of comes from this, you become or are a much better motion graphics designer. Like, you need a foundation. I think in a lot of things, even as an illustrator, like we have a few people here that don't really have a background in design. And when it comes to like an illustration that actually needs to be, in the end, a composition, right? It needs to have type, it needs to have a logo, it needs to have an illustration, and it needs to be all brought together in the end. Like, at times they can struggle with that. So I would say if you have a background in design and then moving into motion or moving into illustration is a great thing to have those, you know, multiple skills like that. But yeah, does that help?
else.
Hi, what is something that, like in the portfolio for clients, so like one who's lost a job, that you feel is lacking in this generation, that a workforce that, it's just not the par with, everyone who found at a place where it's hearing about like 5 students, but like,
Yeah, so what do I see what do I see in portfolios that's kind of lacking?
yeah, portfolio or just like a culture, soft skills,
Yeah, I would say as far as like even this whole round of portfolios and things, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of emphasis on, and going back to what I just said, like layout. And even when it comes to like package design and things like that, like I'm just not seeing a lot of that from students and applicants as far as like good layout, whether it is for a flyer, poster, package design, whatever it is. It's and it might be us because of the studio and the work we do. You know, a lot of it is heavy illustration and things like that, so we don't get a ton of like graphic design and layout, things like that. So, but I don't see a lot of that, and I feel like there needs to be a little bit more emphasis on some of that stuff.
I think the question too is really unique in a way about culture. I guess like over time, is there something missing? Maybe particularly in the soft skills thing. So is it, are you finding everyone's just as strong in communicating their work, selling their work, the confidence, that kind of stuff? We're just in that world of seeing it go up and down, you know, and we want to make sure they're coming in just as strong as someone that's got 2 years experience that could be interviewing with them. So, and are you seeing anything where they can definitely proves out their skills?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the sales side, for sure, you know, selling that project, that even if it's as simple as like just a logo, you know, new coffee shop opened up, you did their logo. There wasn't a say ton of insight from the client. There wasn't a ton of research and things, but craft a story, you know, and to sell that logo to myself, to the coffee shop, whoever it is. Because in an interview, I'll usually go through somebody's portfolio and ask them to talk me through a couple projects. You know, how did this work out? Did it go well? You know, what was the client's brief for this? Things like that. And then at that point, you know, you need to sell me on how that project went, why you went in that direction. Because you're gonna have to do the same thing when you get to the studio like this, when you're presenting, you know, work, whether it's you're presenting to your professor Nick or I'm presenting to Fortnite or new style guide. At some point, you're going to be selling that work, you know, because at any time with any of our clients, they can be like, "That's not what we wanted," you know. No matter what, as you get into your career, you're always going to have to sell what you did, whether it's to your art director, creative director, the client, your teacher, you know. So just hone your skills on talking through the process and backing up your work. You know, I went this direction because of this, you know.
Give a little bit forward. What's your opinion on the field brand and actually popular?
Well, did you say a personal brand?
Yeah, with no brand actually popular. Yeah, what do you think of passion projects and the personal branding that a student or a young designer might have on their website? Any
Yes. Yeah, I would say make sure it's great. I think when if you're gonna put time and effort into your own personal brand, that mark, that logo should be spot on, and it should be some of your best work. I know it's hard designing for yourself. You know, at what point do you say it's good enough and post it or walk away? But it needs to be pretty darn good. You know, if you have your website's up and your logo in that top left is just kind of, you know, it's just not that great. I myself is going to look at that first and be like, hey, I don't know. Everything down to the resume. like with, this whole new job posting, like ton of resumes. And there were some that were just very poorly laid out, color choices, the whole thing. The resume looks like this, I click them on their website, totally different color palette. And it's like, whoa, is this the same person? Like, what's going on here? So I think that personal brand is huge. I mean, we built a studio on branding our own studio personally. We've done a ton of different logos. We make a ton of merch. We've gotten hired for a lot of jobs based on our own personal in-house brand and design. So I've seen it work firsthand.
Where'd you go?
So yeah, I would say put time and effort into that and do the best you can.
Awesome. Anybody else? Dave, I don't know if you're still around. If you have a question, 5 minutes. Anybody else?
I don't know if I have a particular question, but Dan, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Dave Moon. I'm one of the faculty colleague of Nick here. I don't know. Again, I joined in late. I don't know if you have to answer this question, but what are some specific trends are you seeing that could help our students market themselves better? I know you talked about speaking up, selling, and so forth. Are there particular things that you're seeing that has helped young designers, particularly trying to connect with us, so maybe a market that maybe they have not thought of before? We've been talking a lot about broadening their search, not just a narrow scope, but broadening that. So, we talked about generalists to specialists. What are your thoughts on that aspect, Dan?
Yeah, I would say, so I had with this job posting here, like this is kind of perfect timing just because I've been going through all those resumes. I have people sending me resumes for the Illustrator job and then a second email for the motion graphics job. And they don't relate really. If you're doing illustration here, you're not going to be working on motion graphics projects. And that to me seemed just like I'm spitting out emails and throwing my resume all over the place type of thing. I do think you should have some kind of focus. Like I'm great at branding. I can do a little bit of motion graphics and things like that because we have some guys who I hired here that, actually got hired Jillian recently, and she came on to do social media, and she has this broad range of talents in copywriting, and she's great at website design and all these other things that I didn't know until she came in here. And I was like, wow, this is great. So I do think, to get that job, I don't think it's wise to say I can do all of this. You have a job, you need this, but I can do it all. Because like myself, I'd be like, well, I need somebody that does one thing really well. If when you get in here, you can show me you can do more, great, But for the most part, like when we're hiring, it is like an illustrator, a designer, motion graphics. So I do kind of want to see that focus, like say 80%, but then definitely mention, hey, I do like resumes, like where it does, like say you have a little key and it's like, hey, I'm super strong, 100% strong in illustration. My speaking skills are at 10%. I do not like public speaking, but my layout skills are at 90%. And you kind of give this range of like what you're really good at, stuff like that helps.
So thank you very much. So following up on that, so looking at your client list, and you have a very broad, from entertainment to technology to branding and perspective. Nick and I were talking about this. The entertainment market, we're in Southern California. A lot of our students do go to entertainment; they're into it, right? And rightfully so. I mean, we're in a backyard, and we were talking to a lot of folks, and that market had, I don't know if it's a pattern or something that just a temporary, but we've seen some contraction in the market. They're shrinking. The strike had a lot to do with it last year, and also the AI effect. So, in your opinion, because you do have a very large base of client, what are there some trends that you've been seeing last year or two in terms of a workload getting contacted about from a various different clienteles?
Yeah, so I was mentioning this earlier, like when these when the layoffs do happen in the entertainment industry, I saw it back in 2008 with Hasbro, Mattel, and Universal Pictures, and a lot of these companies. Same with Nike and stuff like that. They let people go. They still have projects that need to get done. They come to us. They come to freelancers. Like those projects are on the books for the next 2-3 years. They need to get them done. Now they don't have the manpower. It's cheaper to subcontract it out. So they do that. So we usually get busier as those companies lay people off. I think it's just weird times right now. I do think I don't stress or think that it's the AI thing that much. I do think it's an election year. Things are funky. The economy isn't that great. I think people, after COVID might have got a little excited and hired a bunch of people and were, excited to have people at home. You don't have the expense of the office and this and that. And it's kind of finally catching up, and they're realizing we don't need all these people. So yeah, it's interesting though.
Yeah, I mean, Nick and I were talking about this. We've been around, like for like decades in this market. All markets just generally go up and down. And it's just something really funky about this. We've been telling our students to, two things. One is a mental approach. Get your head straight. And that means what are you gonna do? What else are you gonna do? Take that opportunity, but really leverage that opportunity and and go for it. And then another thing is entrepreneurship, having the business sense, and there's no reason why you can't go and pick up a few $100 logo job by knocking on doors, and teaches you about what you said earlier about selling yourself, selling your craft, and that's how you build so many different tips, a skill set that's going to be helpful when you're working and running your studio.
Yeah, I do think for smaller studios like myself, and if you are a freelance, there's still plenty of work out there. And with the layoffs come more work. In these times when it is kind of down times, there's a lot of times when you're going to see people starting businesses and things. So I think it's a good time to be a designer, for sure.
Dan, I know you
I've
got,
got
I think you got a jet, right, Dan?
Yeah, I gotta wrap it up here in 5 minutes.
all right.
Go ahead, Dave. Go.
One last question for students in here. So, we're trying to figure out how do we add new things to students, right? And if there's like one thing that you could ask the design instructors like Nick, myself, and others to do to help our student, what would that be from your professional perspective that we should be better doing and we should be trying?
I've always said the best professors are, I'd say one like Nick that works in the industry. I had professors that, had worked at a design job in 15-20 years. They were still teaching. To me, like, I love the professor that was actually doing the work and would come to the class with like, I finished this, or my studio did this, or whatever it was. Those were like the professors and classes that I got the most out of, and that I'll never forget. So yeah, what was the question again? Sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's just, what Nick and my colleagues should be doing now, trying something different to better position our students' marketability when they're trying to go out and get a job.
Yeah. I would just say, like I was saying in that sales piece and stuff, teaching and just, I don't want to say public speaking, but one-on-one speaking, and kind of being comfortable with that, presenting your work, to an employer or somebody, practicing that over and over, for sure.
Dan, thank you so much. Really appreciate this.
Yeah. I'll give one little tip that always stuck with me. Not that I used it, but I have a lot of friends up here that work at Nike. And I was told at one point that like big companies like that, like they'll have a post for say a junior designer position. And in that post is going to be a bunch of like verbiage of like, you need to have this and this and this and this. And I was told, if you don't copy and paste, if there isn't a certain amount of words from that job description in your resume and cover letter, that basically the computer weeds it out and it won't even get to the stack that a human actually looks at it. I thought that was interesting. It kind of kind of weird, but, yeah. Cause they're getting thousands and thousands of applications, right? And so I was told like, you have to like make sure it includes like X amount of those keywords in your resume to get it actually even through the computer before it ends up in the stack that a person looks at. So I think that's whatever it's worth, but yeah.
All right, man. Well, thanks so much, bro.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You got Creative South, bud.
Yep, see you in Georgia, Nick. All right.
All right, later. See ya.
All right, yep.